$3 was all he had left, and the little girl beside him had no idea. Mason Carter stood in front of the bakery display case while rain tapped softly against the windows of a busy Seattle afternoon. The smell of fresh bread and vanilla frosting filled the air, but his attention remained fixed on the worn wallet in his hand. 3 single-dollar bills. No credit cards. No savings. Nothing else. Across from him, 8-year-old Olivia pressed her hands against the glass and smiled at the small birthday cakes arranged in neat rows. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement only children could carry. She had spent the entire week talking about her birthday, and Mason had spent the entire week wondering how he would make it happen. "Dad, look at that one," Olivia said. "The one with the little blue flowers." Mason followed her finger. The cake was beautiful. It was also far beyond what he could afford. He forced a smile. "That one is pretty. Do you think birthday wishes really come true?" she asked. For a moment, Mason looked away. Outside, gray clouds covered the city skyline. Inside, customers carried boxes of pastries and cups of expensive coffee toward waiting tables. "Sometimes they do," he answered quietly. Olivia nodded as if that settled everything. Children had a way of believing in miracles long after adults stopped looking for them. A few feet away sat a woman in a tailored white business suit reviewing documents on a tablet. Amelia Brooks barely noticed the father and daughter at first. As chief executive officer of a rapidly growing technology company, she had spent most of the day moving between meetings. She was waiting for a driver while finishing one final report. The bakery was simply a temporary stop between obligations. Mason stepped toward the counter. "How much is the smallest birthday cake?" he asked. The employee offered a polite smile. "The mini celebration cake is $3. Mason felt relief rush through him. $3 exactly. For the first time all day, he allowed himself to breathe. Olivia bounced slightly beside him. "Can we get it?" she whispered. "I think we can." The employee carefully placed the small cake into a white box. It was simple. A little frosting. A single candle. Nothing extraordinary. Yet to Olivia, it looked like the greatest treasure in the world. Mason reached into his wallet and removed the 3 bills. As he did, a receipt slipped out and landed near his feet. He picked it up automatically. It was from a grocery store visit 2 days earlier. The total stared back at him. He remembered putting items back on the shelf because he could not afford them. He remembered skipping dinner the previous night so Olivia could have enough. He folded the receipt and slid it away before she could see it. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said softly as the employee handed over the box. Olivia wrapped her arms around him immediately. "Best birthday ever." Mason closed his eyes for a brief second. The hug was worth more than every dollar he had ever earned. Nearby, Amelia looked up from her tablet. Something about the exchange had caught her attention. The father looked exhausted. His jacket showed signs of wear. His shoes had clearly seen better days. Yet the little girl was smiling as if she had just been handed the world. Amelia watched as Mason carefully carried the cake toward the door, protecting it from the rain waiting outside. She did not know his name. She did not know his story. But for reasons she could not explain, she found herself staring long after they were gone. Rain followed Mason and Olivia all the way home. The small apartment building where they lived sat between a laundromat and a corner market on a quiet Seattle street. Paint peeled from parts of the exterior, and the hallway lights flickered occasionally, but Olivia raced up the stairs carrying the little white cake box as if she were carrying something priceless. "Careful," Mason called. "I am being careful," she answered with a laugh. By the time they reached their apartment, the smell of rain still clung to their jackets. Olivia placed the cake in the center of the tiny kitchen table and stared at it proudly. The apartment was modest. A second-hand couch sat near the window. Family photographs covered one wall. A stack of library books rested beside a worn armchair. Nothing looked expensive. Everything looked loved. "Can I light the candle now?" Olivia asked. Mason smiled. "We should probably wait until after dinner." The words left his mouth before he remembered there was almost nothing for dinner. He opened the refrigerator. A carton of milk. A few eggs. Half a loaf of bread. Not much else. Olivia never seemed to notice when things were difficult. Children often focused on what they had instead of what they lacked. "I can help cook," she offered. "I know you can." Together, they made simple grilled cheese sandwiches. Olivia talked excitedly about school, her friends, and the science project she wanted to enter later that year. Mason listened carefully to every word. No matter how difficult life became, He always made time to listen. Across the city, Amelia Brooks sat in the back seat of a luxury car moving through evening traffic. The image of the father and daughter from the bakery continued to replay in her mind. She had attended meetings worth millions of dollars that day. Yet somehow the thing she remembered most was a little girl smiling over a $3 cake. "Everything all right?" her driver asked. Amelia looked out the window. Yes. But she knew that answer was incomplete. Back at the apartment, Olivia finally lit the candle. The small flame flickered softly above the cake while rain tapped against the glass. Mason dimmed the lights. "Ready?" he asked. Olivia closed her eyes. For several seconds, she remained completely still. Then she made her wish and blew out the candle. Her smile filled the room. "What did you wish for?" Mason asked. "If I tell you, it will not come true." He laughed quietly. "That is how it works." Olivia cut 2 small slices. "This is the best birthday cake ever." Mason looked down at his plate. The cake was tiny. The apartment was small. The future remained uncertain. Yet somehow her happiness made the room feel larger. Later that night, after Olivia had fallen asleep, Mason sat alone at the kitchen table reviewing bills. Rent, utilities, medical expenses from years earlier, job applications, rejection emails. The numbers refused to cooperate. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the darkness beyond the window. Then he folded every paper into a neat stack and set them aside. Tomorrow would bring new problems. Tonight belonged to Olivia. What Mason did not know was that somewhere across Seattle, a successful CEO was still thinking about the exhausted father who had spent his last dollars on a birthday cake. And for the first time in a very long time, she was beginning to question what success actually meant. The next morning arrived with gray skies hanging low over Seattle. Mason Carter woke before sunrise, as he always did, and quietly prepared breakfast while Olivia slept. The apartment remained silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beginning to fill the streets below. He poured the last of the milk into a glass for Olivia and used water in his own coffee to make it last a little longer. It was a routine he had never planned to learn, but one he had mastered nonetheless. When Olivia finally appeared in the kitchen, her smile immediately brightened the room. "I had the best birthday ever," she announced. Mason laughed softly. "I am glad to hear that. My wish is already working." "Is it?" Olivia nodded confidently. "I can feel it." Children had a remarkable ability to believe in good things before there was any evidence they existed. After walking her to school, Mason spent the morning searching for work. He moved from one interview to another, carrying a folder that had grown worn from years of use. His experience was impressive. His references were strong. Yet each conversation seemed to end the same way. "We decided to move in another direction. We found someone with a different background. We will keep your information on file." By noon, rain had returned. Mason sat beneath a bus shelter reviewing another rejection email on his phone. He stared at the screen for several seconds before slipping the device back into his pocket. Frustration appeared briefly in his eyes, but only briefly. Then he stood and continued walking. Across the city, Amelia Brooks found herself distracted during an executive strategy meeting. Financial projections filled a giant screen. Department leaders discussed growth targets and investment opportunities. Normally, she would have been fully engaged. Instead, her thoughts kept drifting back to a small birthday cake sitting on a kitchen table somewhere in Seattle. "Amelia?" one executive asked. She looked up. "Sorry. Continue." The presentation resumed, but her focus remained elsewhere. Later that afternoon, she stopped at the same bakery while returning from another meeting. The employee behind the counter recognized her immediately. As she ordered coffee, her eyes drifted toward the display case where she had first seen the father and daughter. "Busy yesterday?" she asked casually. The employee smiled. "Pretty normal day." Amelia hesitated. The little girl who bought the birthday cake seemed happy. "Very happy." The employee paused. Her father looked like he was carrying the weight of the world, though. Amelia said nothing. Something about the observation felt painfully accurate. That evening, Mason arrived at Olivia's school just as classes ended. Children poured from the building laughing and talking. Olivia spotted him immediately and ran across the sidewalk. "Dad, guess what?" she asked. "What?" "My teacher says parents can come talk about their jobs next month." Mason forced a smile. "That sounds interesting." Olivia grabbed his hand. "You would be the best one." For a brief moment, he did not know what to say. Then he squeezed her hand gently, and they continued walking home through the light rain. Nearby, unnoticed by either of them, a black luxury sedan waited at a traffic light. Amelia happened to glance through the passenger window at exactly the right moment. She saw the exhausted father. She saw the smiling daughter. And for reasons she could not yet explain, she found herself unable to look away. Saturday arrived with a break in the rain. For the first time in days, sunlight filtered through the clouds and painted Seattle in soft gold. Olivia had been talking about the community park celebration all week, and Mason had promised to take her. The event was simple. Local families gathered near the waterfront. Children played games. Volunteers handed out snacks. Small businesses sponsored booths across the park. It was the kind of gathering that reminded people they belonged somewhere. Olivia ran ahead toward a face-painting station, while Mason followed at a slower pace. He carried a backpack filled with water bottles, a light jacket, and the careful attention that came with being both mother and father to a growing child. "Stay where I can see you," he called. "I will," Olivia answered. Several minutes later, she returned with a bright smile and a small painted butterfly on her cheek. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It looks perfect." Olivia beamed. Nearby, a large corporate tent displayed the logo of Brooks Innovations. Amelia Brooks had agreed to attend the event after her public relations team encouraged more community engagement. She expected speeches, photographs, and routine conversations. What she did not expect was to see the same father and daughter again. Across the lawn, she noticed Olivia laughing as Mason helped her win a stuffed animal at a simple carnival game. The prize itself was inexpensive. The joy on the little girl's face was priceless. Amelia found herself watching from a distance. "Who are they?" one of her colleagues asked after noticing her attention. Amelia hesitated. "I do not know." Yet somehow that answer no longer felt completely true. She knew enough to recognize devotion when she saw it. Later that afternoon, volunteers announced a family picnic. Long tables filled with sandwiches, fruit, and drinks stretched beneath rows of trees. Families gathered together while children played nearby. Mason guided Olivia toward an empty section and helped her settle into a seat. "This is fun," she said. "It is. We should come every year." Mason smiled. "That sounds like a good plan." As Olivia ate, Mason quietly pushed part of his meal toward her side of the table. She barely noticed. He made it seem natural. Amelia noticed immediately. She saw the small gesture. She saw the practiced ease with which he did it. Most importantly, she saw that he expected no recognition for it. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees while laughter echoed across the park. For a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful. Amelia found herself thinking about board meetings, quarterly reports, and investment presentations. None of them felt as important as the scene unfolding a few yards away. A father giving without complaint. A daughter receiving without knowing the cost. As the event ended and families began leaving, Olivia reached for Mason's hand. Together they walked toward the exit beneath the warm evening sky. Amelia stood motionless near the corporate tent and watched them disappear into the crowd. Something about that simple image stayed with her long after they were gone. For the first time in years, she realized that the most valuable thing she had witnessed all week was not a business opportunity, a financial forecast, or a strategic partnership. It was a man who had almost nothing and still found a way to give everything. The following Monday began like dozens of others. Mason dropped Olivia off at school, wished her a good day, and watched until she disappeared through the front doors. Only then did he turn and begin the familiar walk toward another interview. The morning air carried the scent of rain, and gray clouds once again stretched across the Seattle skyline. His phone remained silent. No job offers. No new opportunities. Still, he kept moving forward. At Brooks Innovations, Amelia Brooks sat alone in her office before the workday officially began. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but her attention rested on a file open across her desk. She had not intended to investigate the father she had seen at the bakery and the community event. Yet curiosity had gradually become concern. Concern had become respect, and respect had become a desire to understand. A few simple searches had revealed basic information. Mason Carter, mechanical engineer, former project manager, excellent professional record, strong recommendations. Then came the detail that surprised her most. Nearly 6 years earlier, Mason had left a rapidly advancing career shortly after his wife passed away, following a long illness. Amelia leaned back in her chair and read the records again. Most people in his position would have pursued higher income. Many would have relocated. Some would have depended heavily on relatives. Instead, Mason had chosen a path that prioritized his daughter above everything else. The decision had cost him promotions, savings, and professional momentum. Yet nowhere in the records did she find complaints. No lawsuits. No public appeals. No attempts to gain sympathy. Only years of steady work and sacrifice. Across town, Mason arrived for another interview. The hiring manager was polite. The questions were familiar. The outcome became obvious long before the meeting ended. "You have impressive experience," the manager said, "but we are looking for someone with more recent industry involvement." Mason smiled politely. "I understand." He shook hands, thanked them for their time, and left. Outside, he paused briefly beneath an awning as rain began falling once more. Then he continued walking. Later that afternoon, Olivia returned home carrying a folded piece of paper from school. "Dad, remember career day?" she asked excitedly. "Of course. The forms are due this week." Mason accepted the paper and studied it carefully. Parents would visit classrooms and discuss their professions. Olivia watched him expectantly. "You will come, right?" For a moment, he hesitated. The question was simple. The answer felt complicated. "I will try." Olivia frowned. "You always say that when you are worried." Mason laughed softly despite himself. "Do I?" "Yes." She sat beside him. "I am proud of you, you know." The words caught him completely off guard. Children often revealed truths adults struggled to express. Across the city, Amelia closed Mason's file and stared out her office window. The numbers on her company reports suddenly seemed less impressive than before. Revenue could be measured. Market value could be measured. Even success could be measured. But there was no spreadsheet capable of calculating the value of a father who quietly gave up everything for his child. For the first time, Amelia began to suspect that the man everyone overlooked might possess something far more important than money, and she had a feeling she had only discovered the beginning of his story. 2 days later, Brooks Innovations faced a problem that quickly spread through every department. A major infrastructure project scheduled to launch across several communities had stalled. Deadlines were slipping. Costs were rising. Technical teams disagreed on how to move forward. What had once looked like a straightforward expansion now threatened to become a costly failure. Amelia sat through meeting after meeting listening to consultants, analysts, and senior managers offer competing solutions. None of them seemed to address the real issue. By late afternoon, frustration filled the conference room. Charts covered the screens. Financial projections covered the tables. Yet progress remained out of reach. "There has to be something we are missing," Amelia said. The room fell silent. No one had an answer. That evening, after most employees had gone home, Amelia remained alone reviewing project files. As she worked through old reports, a familiar name suddenly appeared inside a technical recommendation attached to a previous engineering contract. Mason Carter. She looked closer. The document described a systems redesign that had saved a struggling project years earlier. The solution was practical, efficient, and remarkably similar to the challenge her company now faced. Amelia continued reading. Then she found another report. And another. Everywhere she looked, the same pattern appeared. Complex problems. Limited resources. Creative solutions. Quiet success. The next morning, Mason was helping Olivia prepare for school when his phone rang. He almost ignored the unfamiliar number. Almost. "Hello," he answered. "Mr. Carter, this is Amelia Brooks." For a brief moment, he searched his memory. Then he recognized the name from local business articles and community sponsorship signs. "How can I help you?" he asked. Amelia appreciated the simplicity of the question. No surprise. No attempt to impress. Just calm professionalism. "I would like to meet with you." Mason glanced at the clock. "About what?" "A project." There was a pause. "I am not currently employed by your company." "I know." Another pause followed. Finally, Mason said, "I can spare an hour." That afternoon, they met at a small coffee shop overlooking Elliott Bay. Ferries moved across the water while clouds drifted above the harbor. Amelia arrived carrying project documents. Mason arrived carrying nothing except a notebook that had clearly been used for years. After brief introductions, Amelia explained the situation. She outlined the technical obstacles, budget concerns, and operational conflicts slowing the project. Mason listened without interrupting. Occasionally, he wrote a note. Occasionally, he asked a question. Nearly 40 minutes passed before he finally closed the notebook. "May I see the community impact report?" he asked. Amelia blinked. "The what?" "The community impact report. We are discussing engineering challenges." Mason nodded. "Exactly." Amelia handed him the report. He spent several minutes studying it. Then he looked up. "Your engineers are solving for efficiency. Your managers are solving for cost. Your investors are solving for returns. That is business." "Yes," Mason said. "But none of them are solving for the families who will actually use this project." The statement lingered between them. Outside the window, sunlight briefly broke through the clouds. Amelia stared at him. For the first time, she began to understand why every document she had read described him differently from everyone else. Mason did not simply solve problems. He started by asking who the solution was supposed to serve. Over the next several days, Amelia could not stop thinking about that conversation. Every meeting seemed different now. Every proposal felt incomplete. For years, her company had measured success through numbers: revenue, expansion, efficiency. Yet Mason had asked a question nobody else had asked. Who was the solution supposed to serve? By Thursday morning, she made a decision. She invited Mason to Brooks Innovations headquarters for a formal project review. The invitation itself surprised several executives. The conference room overlooking downtown Seattle filled quickly. Department heads, consultants, and project managers gathered around a polished table while screens displayed reports and projections. When Mason entered, wearing the same modest jacket Amelia had seen several times before, a few people exchanged uncertain glances. He did not look like the experts they were accustomed to consulting. Mason noticed the reactions, but showed no sign of discomfort. He simply took a seat and listened. One executive began presenting cost-saving measures. Another discussed staffing reductions. A third focused on accelerating construction timelines. Mason remained quiet throughout the presentations. Finally, Amelia turned toward him. "What do you think?" For several seconds, he studied the information on the screen. Then he stood and walked toward the largest map in the room. "These neighborhoods," he said, pointing towards several highlighted districts, "are where most of the future users live." The room nodded. "And these service locations are where you intend to place your primary support centers." Another nod. Mason looked back at the group. "You have designed everything around what is easiest for the company." One manager frowned. "That is not entirely fair." Mason smiled politely. "Maybe not, but it is accurate." Silence followed. He continued. "The families using this system will spend more time traveling than necessary. Elderly residents will struggle with access. Working parents will face longer delays. You are saving money today while creating frustration for years." Several executives shifted in their seats. Amelia noticed something remarkable. Nobody was arguing because nobody could find a flaw in his reasoning. For the next hour, Mason offered alternatives. None required massive spending. None required unrealistic changes. They simply required viewing the project through the eyes of the people it was intended to help. By the time the meeting ended, the atmosphere had completely changed. As employees filed out, one senior manager approached Amelia quietly. "Where did you find him?" Amelia looked across the room where Mason was gathering his notes. "I think he found us." Later that afternoon, Amelia walked Mason toward the elevator. "You saved us weeks of mistakes," she said. Mason shook his head. "Your team is talented. They just needed a different perspective. Most consultants would charge a fortune for what you did today." He laughed softly. "Good thing I am not most consultants." The elevator doors opened. Before stepping inside, Mason paused. "If you move forward with the changes, families will notice." Amelia nodded. "That matters to you. It should matter to everyone." After he left, Amelia stood alone in the hallway watching the elevator numbers descend. She realized something important. The man who had spent his last dollars on a birthday cake was now helping guide a project worth millions. Yet nothing about him had changed. The same quiet dignity, the same calm voice, the same habit of putting other people first. And for the first time, Amelia began wondering whether the greatest success she had ever encountered was standing right in front of her all along. The weeks that followed transformed more than the project. They transformed the people involved in it. Under the revised plan, Brooks Innovations began implementing the changes Mason had recommended. Service centers were relocated closer to neighborhoods that needed them most. Access points became easier for families to reach. Community feedback sessions were added before major decisions were finalized. At first, some executives worried the adjustments would slow progress. Instead, the opposite happened. Public support increased. Participation grew. Local organizations that had once been skeptical began offering cooperation. The project that had nearly stalled was now moving forward with unexpected momentum. Amelia watched the results unfold with growing admiration. Every report seemed to confirm the same truth. Mason had been right. One afternoon, she attended a community presentation where residents were invited to review the latest plans. Parents asked questions. Teachers offered suggestions. Small business owners shared concerns. Instead of frustration, there was optimism. Instead of resistance, there was trust. As the meeting ended, an elderly woman approached Amelia. "Thank you for listening to us," she said. Amelia smiled politely. "We are trying our best." The woman nodded. "That engineer of yours helped make it happen." Amelia looked across the room where Mason was speaking with a group of residents. "He is not actually our engineer." The woman laughed softly. "Maybe not officially." Later that evening, Amelia sat alone in her office reviewing project outcomes. The numbers were impressive. Cost efficiency had improved. Public approval ratings had increased. Long-term projections looked stronger than ever. Yet the statistic that stayed with her was not on any report. It was the growing number of people whose lives would become easier because someone had cared enough to ask the right questions. Across town, Mason sat at the kitchen table helping Olivia with her science homework. The apartment looked exactly the same as it always had. The worn furniture remained. The stack of library books continued to grow. Bills still occupied one corner of the table. Yet something felt different. For the first time in years, possibility had quietly returned. "Dad, you seem happier," Olivia said while drawing a diagram for school. Mason looked up. "Do I?" "A little." He smiled. "Maybe I am." Olivia grinned and returned to her project. Sometimes children notice changes before adults recognize them themselves. The following week, Brooks Innovations held an internal review meeting to celebrate the project's progress. Executives who had once doubted Mason's ideas now referenced them regularly. Several managers openly praised his contributions. Amelia listened as department leaders described successful outcomes. Then she realized something important. Every achievement being discussed traced back to one simple principle: put people first. The realization stayed with her long after the meeting ended. That evening, standing beside her office window overlooking the Seattle skyline, Amelia reflected on everything that had happened since the day she entered a small bakery. She had first noticed a tired father buying a birthday cake. Then she discovered a man defined not by hardship, but by character. Now she was witnessing the impact of his values on thousands of lives. And as city lights began to glow beneath the evening sky, Amelia understood that the most extraordinary part of Mason's story was not his sacrifice. It was the fact that despite everything he had lost, he had never stopped finding ways to help others. Several months later, the project officially launched. Community centers opened their doors. Families gained access to services designed around their real needs. Local leaders praised the collaboration. Newspapers wrote articles about innovation, leadership, and public engagement. Yet the person most responsible for the transformation remained almost invisible to the public eye. Mason preferred it that way. On a bright spring afternoon, Brooks Innovations hosted a formal event to celebrate the success of the initiative. Business leaders, city officials, educators, and community representatives filled a large auditorium overlooking Elliott Bay. Amelia stood backstage reviewing her notes while guests settled into their seats. She had delivered countless speeches throughout her career, but this one felt different. Out in the audience, Mason sat beside Olivia near the back of the room. Olivia wore her favorite blue dress and looked around with excitement. "This place is huge," she whispered. Mason smiled. "It is." "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little." Olivia laughed. "You always say that when something important is happening." The ceremony began. Several speakers discussed economic impact, community partnerships, and future opportunities. Applause filled the room more than once. Finally, Amelia stepped to the podium. The audience quieted immediately. She thanked employees, community organizations, and local leaders. Then she paused. For a moment, she looked toward the back rows where Mason and Olivia were seated. "Today," she said, People will talk about numbers, achievements, and success. But none of those things explain why this project truly worked. The room grew still. Amelia continued. Months ago, I walked into a small bakery on a rainy afternoon. I saw a father and his daughter standing at a counter. The little girl was excited about her birthday. The father had exactly $3 in his wallet. A few people exchanged curious glances. Amelia kept speaking. I did not know his name. I did not know his story. I only knew that he spent every dollar he had to buy a small birthday cake for his child. The auditorium became quieter. Later, I learned that this same man had given up career opportunities to raise his daughter. I learned that he continued helping others despite his own struggles. And I learned that when our company faced a difficult challenge, he was the person who showed us how to put people before profits. No one moved. No one spoke. Amelia looked directly at Mason. Everything we celebrate today began with a lesson from a father who never asked for recognition. The silence deepened. Hundreds of people sat motionless as the story settled over the room. Some lowered their eyes. Others looked toward Mason with new understanding. Olivia slowly reached for her father's hand. Mason squeezed it gently. He seemed almost uncomfortable with the attention. Amelia smiled softly. Success is not measured by what we keep. It is measured by what we give. For several seconds after she finished speaking, the entire auditorium remained silent. Not because there was nothing to say, because everyone finally understood. Then applause began. It started with a few people, then dozens, then hundreds. Yet even as the room rose to its feet, Mason looked only at Olivia. She smiled up at him exactly as she had on the night of her birthday. In that moment, he realized something beautiful. The $3 had never been the real gift. The real gift was knowing that his daughter had grown up seeing what love looked like. And as sunlight poured through the windows overlooking Seattle, the room celebrated a successful project while one quiet father celebrated something far greater. He had kept his promise to the person who mattered most.